Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Miguel Garcia, Co-CEO of Infosel, to discuss the rise of the retail investor in Latin America. Miguel, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Great to be here, Jill. Thanks for the invite.
You got it. And let's talk about the market before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. What were some of the trends that you were seeing that were already in place?
Yeah, it was very interesting because the market was particularly kind of isolated or dedicated probably to only a privileged segment of the market. Just to give you a little bit of context, the number of investments accounts, at least in Mexico, was less than 300,000. That's like 0.3% of the adult population. In the US, you have like tens of millions of accounts, and almost more than 50% of the people have an investment account. So before the pandemic, you had very few number of accounts, and this was mainly a market that was servicing high net worth individuals, because the maximums that the brokerage firms were asking for opening accounts were high for the average person in Mexico, and it's the same in LatAm. So a huge part of the population was kind of isolated from this market, both in terms of the minimum requirements of the investment accounts, but also I would say that because of the lack of interest and knowledge and exposure about the markets. No? Something that radically was changed with COVID and all the retail bonanza that we saw in the last 2 years.
So with the new digital players that are coming into the space, what has the reaction been with incumbent companies?
Yeah, so what happened was that there were several players, very few of them, especially in Mexico and Brazil, that were already positioned with a very strong or mature digital offering or digital product, in a way that their structure was oriented to servicing, both in terms of costs and in terms of infrastructure, for servicing lower amounts of accounts, and probably the middle of the pyramid of people, no? And these 2 or 3 players basically that had infrastructure in place, for instance, that had a mobile app and a digital onboarding and some other aspects of it. Basically, they owned most of the growth and the explosion that came once the pandemic hit, and once you started to see the GameStops, the AMCs, and all these crazy trade mania, no, that started happening with Robinhood and other players in the US. That certainly happened as well in Latin America. To also a couple of numbers that explain this very nicely. As I mentioned before the pandemic, less than 0.5% of the population invested directly in stocks. Now that number has multiplied by 10. So now you see that between 2-3% of adult population are now or have opened an investment account and are trading or owning directly stocks or mutual funds or ETFs. And the interesting part of it is that there was a combination of incumbents that were digitally that had the digital literacy and the structure to be able to capture this. But at the same time, you started seeing several startups, and with huge funding, especially from the SoftBanks, the Accels, the founder funds of the world, coming in and seeing this huge opportunity. So it will be very interesting to see what comes next, because there are a couple of incumbents that have a digital offering robust enough, but at the same time there are digitally native players with good backing that are starting to gain some traction and to gather a lot of number of investors.
So Miguel, when we look at the current environment right now, how has it matured and how does it compare to other international markets?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's why I think a lot of eyes are now into the broad investment space in Latin America, and it's because it's a greenfield basically. The market is very immature. The market capitalizations of even Brazil and Mexico, which are the largest markets, are like way down in terms of, for instance, GDP. The both markets are less than 50% of their GDPs, while in developed markets this number is probably 200 or 300%. So there's a big gap in terms of market cap, in terms of the offer, the possibilities, the instruments in which people can invest. But the biggest gap and the biggest greenfield, I think, it's in terms of the demand. As I mentioned, only the average in the average Latin American country, between 3 and 4% of population invest in the market and in stocks, while in developed markets, this number is probably 65%. So there's a huge gap. I mean, there's to give another, you see some other KPIs like banking accounts, like smartphone penetration, and all of these numbers and all of these KPIs kind of give you a sense that the market is going to be growing very strongly and almost doubling every couple of years. Now, there's a lot of people that has been relegated and hasn't been part of probably the best wealth creation method, or driver in the history of the world. And I think this boom is started in Latin America, and you're going to see it booming in the next 5 or 10 years.
All right. And to wrap up here, Miguel, what's next for the region in the near term?
Yeah, so I think that it's going to, as I mentioned, it's going to be interesting to see this clash between the incumbents and the new startups that are, moving very agile, that move fast, that have very low customer acquisition costs, and very efficient structures. As you guys are aware, Nubank, for instance, did IPO with a very lean structure compared to the incumbents. So I think you're going to see these new players taking or trying to take a piece of the market. It's going to be interesting to see how the incumbents react. I would assume that some of them will have to buy out probably the new entrants rather than build their own digital offering. So you could expect some consolidation there. And also it's not that possible for me, but it also is a possibility. Some international players like Robinhood, Charles Schwab, and the likes could be starting to look down the border and probably going in with some sort of alliance, consolidation, or by themselves. So it's a good years and good times are coming for the investment space in Latin.
All right, Miguel, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.
Thanks for having me.